we will have a recording of the presentation that you will be able to go back, and in case you missed any information, the PowerPoint will be available. So some of the things that we want to talk about, first of all, is a healthy lawn has the following benefits. And we all know that aesthetics is one of the most important things. People really enjoy seeing what the picture showing on the slide right now. Two lawn chairs looking out over a beautiful field of dark green grass, some trees, a little bit of shade and so forth. But within that grass, that's a whole ecosystem of things that we normally take for granted. So one of the things that besides the aesthetic beauty of it, we all know that grass helps with erosion control, and absorbs runoff and so forth. And then if you live in a high area that is prone to a lot of rain and so forth, you'll know how beneficial this is. You might have, as we move out to West Texas and so forth, where you don't have a lot of rainfall, you'll see a lot of naturescapes using rocks and succulents and so forth like that. But in an area of Southeast Texas that we live in right now, in Houston and the surrounding areas, we do get a lot of rainfall, a lot of precipitation each year. So helping with that runoff and everything is a big attribute for us. Supports biodiversity. It supports air quality. Just think of all the living insects that are in the grass and so forth. It's a great opportunity for you if you ever have young kids or grandkids or so forth. Take them out in the grass and let them explore. They can find little bugs crawling around. Give them a microscope and let them explore and see what all is living in the grass. A lot of people don't think about this as a living ecosystem, but it actually helps support birds and other wildlife and so forth like that. We talked about erosion control, reduces heat. This is an extreme important to us, and I'll just read something right here real quick. In doing the research, on a block of 8 houses, the front lawns have the cooling effect of 70 tons of air conditioning. The plants, through transpiration of water, which is basically evaporation of water, which it cools themselves, also cools the surrounding area. When the temperature of the sidewalk in that area, if you happen to live in a subdivision or an area with a bunch of houses in it, when the sidewalk reaches about 100 degrees, the temperature of the adjacent turf remains about 75 degrees, and it will last into the night, with studies showing about a 13-degree cooling. So it does have some effects there as well. We all know that cleaning the air, removing carbon dioxide. I'm not sure if a lot of you knew this, but grass is the largest carbon eliminator in the United States. So that's an excellent source there. Reduces noise and glare and generates oxygen. All right. So talking a little bit more about grasses, turf grasses are basically divided into 2 groups. You have warm season grasses and cool season grasses. Again, depending on where you're watching from today, either one of these could apply to you. If you're in the Houston area, or if you're in Southeast Texas or so forth, obviously you're going to look for more of the warm season grasses. And these are, if you have an established lawn already and you are lucky enough to have a lawn service, check with the lawn service and make sure that they know what they're doing when it comes to your lawn care work. Ask them if they know what type of grass you're growing. Ask them if they know what the proper fertilization methods is and stuff like that. So don't just trust them that they're going to know what they're doing. With a simple few questions, you are the owner of that property and you have invested interest in that lawn. So you want to make sure that they know what they're doing and so forth. If you're a homeowner and you do the work yourself, say for example, you're starting a lawn from you're going to want to focus on warm season grasses. These are grasses that like temperatures above 80 degrees. They usually form a thick mat or turf through horizontal stems called stolons or rhizomes. These are grasses that are native to Africa, South America, and Asia. And some excellent examples of these that we grow predominantly around the Houston and Southeast Texas area are St. Augustine, Centipede, Zoysia, Bermuda, and Bahia. Now, some of you in the cool season areas, those are going to be grasses growing between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. We don't have a lot of those grasses around here, but as you get up into northern Texas, some of your northern United States, you'll find a lot of these grasses predominant in the area. These originated from Europe, and some of the more popular examples of that are going to be your tall fescue and your Kentucky bluegrass. So 4 factors in choosing the grass that's right for you is the first one is going to be basically the amount of sunlight. A lot of people in the Southeast Texas have beautiful trees in their landscape, and they value those trees just as much as the green grass. So you want them to work in harmony. So you're going to need to do some research. If say, for example, you're having problems with thinning of grass in your yard, and you're wanting to know why and what's going on, it could be a direct correlation of the amount of sunlight that your actual grass is getting. There are certain grasses that require more sunlight than others. St. Augustine is one that requires the least amount of light, which about 3 hours of direct sunlight for St. Augustine. And I want to say that, let me see in my notes here. I want to say Bahia grass is going to require the most amount of sunlight. So again, knowing what type of grass you have in your yard is going to affect how you treat it from this point on, and it's going to also be able to answer a lot of questions that you might have. Temperature extremes, here in Houston, we have temperatures of hot, and hotter. Every once in a while we'll get those cool temperatures in the fall, or actually not fall, but sometimes what we call winter around here. During those dormant seasons, you will see your grasses go in a dormant stage, and they will turn a lighter shade of brown. The grasses aren't going to stay green throughout the whole year, so keep that in mind. Other factors that you're going to need to choose when talking about the grass is maintenance that you're willing to perform. There are some grasses that are more high maintenance than others, I guess you would call it. If you have a lawn and you have children or grandchildren, and you have a lot of activity on your lawn, you have people walking around, that's going to require a certain type of grass that's going to hold up to a lot more traffic, foot traffic and so forth, as one that if you're just having a lawn that's in your front yard that is just meant for aesthetic beauty and you don't have a lot of foot traffic on it, you're going to be able to go with a completely different type of grass. Your mowing is going to be completely different type on that, as well as your fertilization and your watering. So keep those all in mind. And then the soil type, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on that as we go through the presentation this morning on soil types. Here I've included a graph on popular turf grasses here that you might find in Southeast Texas. Again, you don't have to copy all this information off of here. This presentation or this chart will be on the presentation, and it is being recorded, so you will be able to view it on the YouTube channel. Bahia grass, Bermuda grass, St. Augustine, centipede, carpet grass, zoysia, those are all popular grass varieties that you will find here in the Southeast Texas. It goes through and talks about how much filtered sunlight, how much shade, and one column that you might want to pay more attention to is you might not think that all grass is going to be a dark shade of green. The normal color, if you look at the Bahia grass, usually tends to be a yellow green. So if you have a Bahia grass yard and you're looking for that dark, rich green grass, you're not going to find that. And if you're fertilizing it and with the hopes that you're going to get that grass green, it's just not going to get there, because that is not what that grass is going to do as far as color wise. So that's another important why you should know, another reason why you should know the type of grass that you have. The next one, some of you might have seen before, some of you might not have seen before. It's a USDA hardiness zone map for Texas, and we are actually in zone 9A. And that is, if you look at the little chart there, I know it's kind of small to read, but that brings us down into temperature readings of usually about 25 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and for our winter temperatures and so forth. And as you see, as it progresses up in the state of Texas, those zones actually decrease, and the temperature decreases for the winter times as well. So 9B or 9A, 9B is the very tip of Texas, down in the valley where below San Antonio, Brownsville, and so forth like that is for that area. This is annual precipitation for Texas. The purple area is over on our side of Southeast Texas. If you look at that, if you've lived here, or if you're new to the area and you're not familiar with how much rainfall we're going to get through the year, we expect anywhere from 50 to 54 inches of rain per year. So this is going to be, if you're in say, for example, you're not in a subdivision and you live out on a ranch, or you have a couple acre yard and you have a low-lying yard, and it tends to flood or it tends to hold water more than other areas. You're going to want to look at grasses that are going to be water or more tolerant of wet roots than others. No grass will survive under constant water or constant flooding and so forth. So take that into consideration. But when you are looking at things to plant here in Texas, or specifically in Southeast Texas, just know that we do get a lot of rainfall as opposed to the very west side of Texas, anywhere under 14 inches of rainfall a year. So another thing that I want to point out is in your yards, if you're having areas that are tricky spots that you can't seem to get any particular grass to grow in or something like that, one thing that you might want to consider is ground covers. This is an excellent source for changing up the dimensions of your yard. It makes it look more 3D. You can add some height, you can add some texture. Ground covers are an excellent source when shade is too dense from the trees, or if you have shrubbery already established. Ground cover is an excellent opportunity. Like I said, it provides color and different textures. And I'm going to show you some examples on the following slides of how we can incorporate those. It also helps, just like with grass, by keeping soil in place, helps with that erosion process, helps with runoff and so forth. They usually require less than 18 inches of height, so they don't get really tall or really overbearing on the rest of your yard and so forth like that. And really, once they've been established, they have little maintenance. So they're really good. There are a lot of different varieties out there now. And we're just going to go through a couple slides right now of some examples of ground covers that are popular in the area. On the left side, you'll see Asian jasmine. And what's good about Asian jasmine is you could really trim this to however you want it to flow in your yard. Basically, you can shape it, you can trim it, you can take trimmings off the side. Like with this one, they have the edge trimmed on the sidewalk. It's very even on the side. It grows correctly up to the trees. You don't have to worry about any water filtration going down through to the roots of the large trees or anything. So there's great filtration through those ground covers. So that's an excellent source there. Over on the right side is some assorted sedums. Sedums, if you've never used them before, are basically little succulent plants. They can grow in upright height, or they can grow in ground cover fashion. Some of them have little flowers that come with them. They do have different textures. You can see in the picture there where you can have different shades of green. So it's an excellent source. of incorporating some ground cover in your lawn. The next couple that we're going to talk about here is pretty popular in the Southeast Texas, the Houston area. We have our ever popular English ivy. And over on the right-hand side, one of my favorite plants is hostas. Hostas, look at those plants. Those are just really, really gorgeous. You have a lot of color, a lot of variety, a lot of texture happening in that one picture. And what people don't realize with their hostas too, they also produce a flower. They'll have a long stem with a little, sometimes fragrant flower on the end of or anything, but they're not really known for their flowers. They're more known for their texture and their color, going from that steel gray in that picture to that variegated green leaf color. And you can, there's no right or wrong answer with these. You can see how they've clumped them around the trees. And what's good about hostas are they're easily separated. They're good for once they get established after a couple of years, you can go in and dig some out and be able to spread them around through your yard, so forth like that. So excellent recommendation. And there's a lot of varieties out there on hostas that have really come up. The next two slides, variegated vinca. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's another variegated plant. It's a dark green with a little lime green or almost white edging on the leaf there. And they do produce a little purple flower as well. And then over on the right, the Louisiana phlox. One thing I do want to mention and make you be cautious of in your ground covers is that some of these, like with the variegated vinca, they can actually take over a particular area in your yard. So these are going to be a little bit more maintenance, high maintenance, because you can see the trailing vines there that will spread out into your yard. So if you have more of a wildlife area, a more of a nature area that you don't mind, a more formal garden that you want to keep things kind of in a specific area and stuff like that, you can use like variegated vinca and your Louisiana phlox, because they will spread, but just keep that in mind, and keep that in mind for any ground cover that you're going to be looking for, that you don't want it to take over your actual regular lawn. So we've included a little guide here for some ground covers, and Brandy and or Susan or whoever, if you could type in the webpage for the Texas Superstores, that would be great. Texas Superstores, guys, is a publication that Texas puts out each year of plants that do really, really well in Texas. And there's some great varieties there, in addition to the ones that you see here on the chart that are handled by a lot of the nurseries here in the Houston area, greater Houston area. And they are going to be designated by having a special tag on them, designating them as a Texas Superstore. They are known to be heat tolerable. They're known to be excellent in drought situations and so forth like that. So in addition to these on the chart, just make sure that you get a chance to check out those on the Texas Superstore list. The next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to switch back to the lawn now after we've talked a little bit about ground covers. The quality of your turf is going to depend on a couple of different things: your color, your density, and your absence of insects and diseases. Okay. So again, we talked a little bit about each one of these. Density, again, is going to come, like if, for example, if you have a high shaded yard and you have some low spots, or you have some areas that your grass is not in as thick as possible, you might see those areas pop up with more weeds. So how you're going to correct that situation is going to depend on what you're going to do. You're either going to cover it with a ground cover, or you're going to cover it with some type of shrubbery or something like that. But keep that in mind. Insects and disease, that is usually an indicator when you have grass that is going through stress or any type of drought or anything like that. If you have grass that is really heavily thatched, you will find a lot more insects and disease there. We're going to talk a little bit more about thatch and how to get rid of that in part 2 of our presentation. I don't want to get into that right now. But just keep that in mind. And so those are all areas we talked about, color and stuff like that. But basic chores for having a quality lawn include, we're going to talk a little bit about today about proper fertilizing, watering, mowing, and the control of insects and disease, like I said, and pests. And that's going to fall into part 2. So what I want to talk to you next is something very, very important. And we have the 2 website addresses up here. And guys, if y'all can go ahead and put those in the chat box now. But soil testing is one of the most important issues that you can do to help extend the life and do the best you can for your yard. If you don't know what you are doing or what you have under your sod, under your grass, as far as the nutrient breakdown of your soil, you're not going to ever be able to improve the quality of what you're looking at on top of the ground. Okay, so those 2 websites there, and on the next page is what you would look at for a soil sample form for information. Okay, so a soil sample in your yard, if you've never done a soil sample, they are not complicated to do. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension has a soil science lab up at College Station, and those 2 websites that were on the previous page will actually get you to these sheets right here. All right, it's easy to fill out. It's just asking for basic information, what you're looking for, and then I know it's kind of small print, but over in the bottom corner on the left-hand side, there is choices from 1 through 10, analysis suites, 1 per sample. All right, and it starts off with a number 1, a routine analysis, and that is going to test your phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, calcium, all those basic essential nutrients that are needed to be able to have your soil be the best that it can be. And that is $12 per sample. All right. And then it goes on per sample after that, from 19 to 26 to 34, all the way up to $62. All right. And those get very, very specific. All you need is the basic soil sample. All right. And so on the second page, the page on the side of the soil sample information form basically tells you how to take a soil sample. If you have a front yard, and say, for example, you have a front yard, a backyard, and a garden, all right, and you want to do a soil sample in each one of those, you would consider each one of those areas as a specific zone, all right? You would take a zone soil sample information or soil sample for the front yard, and you would indicate that on your soil sample. You would indicate zone A, and you would know that that is your front yard, or you could write front yard on it. Same thing for your backyard. That would be zone 2 or listed as backyard. Garden, zone 3, or listed as garden. All right, because each one of those are going to be specific soil texture, and they're going to each have, they could possibly have, depending on if you're on a site that had soil removed or soil added, over the years, if you've ever had new construction done on it, if you have a sandy loam soil, say for example, if you were building a home and a lot of the sand stayed in the yard, and it eventually worked its way to the soil and everything like that. So that's why it's important to do a different zone for each one. And you would have to do a $12 sample for each one of those. Usually the turnaround time on that is 7 to 10 days. You will see the sample of the addresses where to send them to. We used to have the soil sample boxes here at our extension office. Unfortunately, we do not have those anymore. But what you can do is put those in So you would take a soil sample from your front yard. Let me get back to that. All right. Depending on the size of the yard, if you're looking at an average yard in Houston, and that would be like 50 by 50. I'm just guessing. All right. So what you would want to do is take 4 to 5. You would want to dig in your yard with like a little garden trowel or whatever. Get down about 6 inches of soil below your grass level. All right. And you would take that soil sample, dig it out, not making a big hole or anything, but going down about 6 inches. And you would collect all those 4 to 5 samples and put them in one 5-gallon bucket, mix them all together, make sure it's nice and good. Do this on a day when it's not really muddy, but it's kind of easy to be able to stick the spade in the ground, but you don't want it muddy. Okay, so you're gonna mix those in the bucket, mix them all together, and then fill a quart size, or usually about a quart size is enough. All right, but I would make sure that the dirt, the soil is dry, because they're gonna have to dry it whenever they get to the soil lab anyway, and it's gonna be easier to mail. In case the bag gets punctured or anything, you don't want water getting out or anything and ruining your package. So mix those in a 5-gallon bucket. Take your sample out of there to fill a quart-size Ziploc bag. Make sure the soil's dry. Send it off to the address that you see on the page there with your dollar amount and so forth. And on the website, it gives you all the directions on how to pay, when to send it, what you're going to get back. You're going to get a soil analysis back. If you have questions about the soil analysis and you would like for me to go over it with you, or you can reach out to Paul Winsky. He's the horticulture agent here, or Kim Perry. She's the Prairie View agent. We can all go over those soil samples with you, discuss what your soil might be lacking, discuss what your soil might not need. You might be fertilizing all these years for, say, for example, nitrogen, and you have such a high buildup of nitrogen in your soil that your soil can't take any more nitrogen, and all that nitrogen is just running off into the street, and it's going down the drain, and it's going into the water system. So it's best to get a soil sample about every 3 years to kind of test the quality of your lawn and so forth. All right. So next question: to water or not to water? This is the age-old question, guys. Here, we talked about the Houston area receiving a lot of water. A lot of water each year. So a lot of times people are watering their yards whenever they really don't even need to. All right. And another thing that, if you have in-ground irrigations or sprinklers or anything set up like that, make sure that you check those pretty periodically, because I've driven in some subdivisions and I've driven in areas of homes where the in-ground irrigation and so forth is like that. And a lot of times the sprinklers aren't even pointed towards the direction of the yard. They get twisted, they get hit by the lawnmower, they get turned around and so forth like that. And then, so you're watering something that doesn't even need to be watered, or the water's going down the culvert, or it's going into the street and it's totally being wasted. And you're running up your water bill and you're not even getting the resources of the water. All right. So soil type affects the amount of water. We talked about sandy loam soils earlier. If you have that type of soil, those soils are going to need to be watered a little bit more than, say, for example, like a heavier clay soil underneath your sod grass, because the water doesn't drain through those as much as, Another tip is you need to let the lawn show you when it needs water. If you're ever out, hopefully you're walking around in your grass or your yard and you're taking advantage of the beauty and what you've done. If you feel that the grass is when you walk across your lawn and you can turn around and see the footprints in the grass, and the grass does not spring back up to life really good, that's an example of when you would need to water. Okay. There are other indications. If you need to get down on your hands and knees, maybe in your backyard, maybe not in your front yard where your neighbors are looking at you thinking, what the heck are they doing kneeling down in their yard looking at the grass? But if you want to do that, an indication is if your leaves of your grass will actually roll up and curl up, because that will stop the transpiration process. That stops the evaporation process. So those plants are holding on to more water. So that means they need more water. Okay. So little indications like that and are always good. Obviously when the grass changes color, that's a great indication there as well. So let the grass show you when it needs water. If you see that we're going to be expecting a lot of rain in the forecast, make sure you turn your sprinklers off. I've driven through subdivisions all over the place in heavy rainfalls, and people's sprinklers are going off. Again, you're wasting money, you're wasting resources, and your sprinklers don't need to be on. So pay attention to what's going on with that stuff like that. When you're going to water deeply and infrequently. I would say watering 1 inch to 1.5 inches per week is usually what's required. Okay. If you water, I've seen, just like with the sprinklers in the water, people out in their yard and they're out there with the water hose and they're kind of just taking the water hose and they're going back and forth and going back and forth. And most of the time it's like a fine mist or whatever. And you'll watch them and they're out there for like 5 or 10 minutes, and the top of the yard gets wet and all the grass is wet and it's shining pretty in the sunlight and everything. And they think they've done their due diligence, that they've given their yard a great drinking of water, when they actually haven't done anything. All right. If anything, that water is maybe going to get down to the very top centimeter of the soil, and it's going to encourage shallow root growth. And what that does is encourage insects and disease and weeds to take over. Okay. So you want to establish a water deeply frequency. All right. When you water deeply, those roots of that grass will reach down much more further into that soil, and it's going to help with that soil erosion. It's going to break open that soil compaction and so forth. And that's going to, as you have more roots, it's going to produce a darker, greener, thicker, lush carpet on top of the grass, on top of the soil, that's going to keep out the insects and the diseases and so forth. All right. Early morning is the best time to water. I discourage people from watering late in the evening, because you don't have as much evaporation or transpiration on the water, on the leaves, and that encourages insects and disease to harbor onto the plants. Okay. If you water in the morning, early in the morning, that when that sun comes up, it'll eventually burn that off. Once the water soaks through the soil, what's left on the grass, it will burn off through transpiration, and you won't have that worry about fungus or any type of disease or anything like that. All right. Let's see. Fertilization and mowing. I'm gonna try and speed up through here, guys. We're almost finished, so bear with me. Fertilizing is very, very important, guys. I don't want to say that, I've talked about, nitrogen and phosphorus, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are all needed just like any living organism. Okay. Your grass needs fertilizer, but in what capacity and what strength. All right. So that's why it's important to have those soil tests done. You want your turf grass to have the right color, thickness, and health. And so by doing that, fertilizing is going to be very important. The major nutrients required for lawns are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and iron. And those numbers are going to come, or your first three numbers, your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK, are going to come in different strengths when you look at fertilizer bags. This is going to be determined, your fertilizer is going to be determined by what you get back on your soil sample. All right. You might be looking at maybe a 10-10-10, where the NPK is all the same. All right. You might be looking at something where it might be a 20, 10, 15. All right. You might need more nitrogen. You might need less phosphorus. You might need more potassium and so forth. So keep in mind that when you're looking for fertilizer, not all fertilizers are created equally. If you would like to go the organic route, there is organic fertilizers out there. You will pay a little bit more for them, but the opportunities for organic fertilizers and a lot of yard resources are becoming more prevalent, all right, for those who would prefer to go the organic route. Mowing. This is very important, guys. Necessary for quality turf grass. The frequency and height of cut depends on the type of turf grass. All right, if you're going to be growing a cooler season grass, a lot of people will put ryegrass in, annual ryegrass in the winter to keep their grass looking green and pretty, and they'll kind of overseed it over their other side. Usually you're going to want to cut that, or most of the times you're going to want to cut that at a higher rate than you will like your normal St. Augustine and everything. And you're going to want to cut that at, yes, at a higher rate and so forth. Rule of thumb is never to remove more than a third of the leaf area per mowing. And it's not necessary to remove clippings for the health of the lawn. Actually, the clippings actually provide essential nutrients when they break down into the lawn. So it's for aesthetic beauty if you choose to remove the clippings. If you actually have, when you're cutting your grass, and say, for example, you went a little bit longer in between cuttings and the grass is going to be a little bit taller and you're cutting, and you kind of produce these clump grass that come out the side of the mower and everything, all you have to do is run over those again and chop them up to a finer finer texture. A lot of times they have different blades that are made for finer cuts. So again, if you're doing this yourself, pay attention to what you have going on there. And we have a little comment there about thatch, and we're, again, like I said, we're going to be talking about that in the next presentation. But there are certain times of the year that you're going to want to approach this subject. Thatch, it's not done in all times of the year, usually in the spring or the fall, and we want to get rid of that because of the weeds and insects that live there. All right, the last thing before our resources page, we're getting ready to finish up, guys. Make sure that your mower blade is always sharp. All right, if you use a dull mower blade, it is actually going to crinkle the blades of the grass more than cutting them off sharply. All right, anytime you cut the grass, that infects, or that allows opportunity for insects and fungus and disease to come into the grass. So if you do a clean cut with your blade, that is going to ensure a quicker heal time on the grass, as opposed to a dull blade that's just going to bend the grass and allow more insects and disease to enter to the grass. Okay, don't let your grass become overgrown before mowing. That causes stress on the grass. And so again, you never want to cut off more than a third of the grass showing. You always want to walk the yard. You're always looking for any type of debris in the yard. Always wear your safety equipment. Check the oil. Just as important as checking the blade to make it sure it's sharp. A lot of the newer engines and so forth like that, you don't need to check them often, but just get in the habit of doing that. Adjusting the mower blade before you start mowing, and your coarser texture grasses are going to be cut higher than your fine cut grasses. All right, and you definitely want to avoid grass clippings as mulch. You can leave them in the yard to break down for nutritional value, but you do not want to put them over your mulch or any type of flower beds or gardens or anything like that, because a lot of times it's going to contain the grass seed in it, And then so what you're basically doing is spreading grass seed into areas that you're trying to keep free of grass. So, you know, just keep that in mind. So with that being said, guys, that's the end of our presentation for today. These are the references that I got this information from. And these are all great resources. Again, you don't have to copy them now. This is being recorded. And with that, Ms.
Shannon,
Brandy, yes?
excuse me. I have a lot of questions here. Would you
Okay,
like to answer the questions, or would you like
we'll get to
them
as
to
many
be sent
questions
to
as we
you
can.
via
Yes, ma'am.
email? I'm
We'll
sorry.
get to as many as we can, and then after that, we'll have to worry about email. We'll have to go with email.
Okay.
But let's answer some now.
All right. So, first question, how do I get rid of Virginia buttonweed?
Um, so that is probably going to be a specific question I can't get into now, because that is going to be, if it's a question that I'm gonna have to do some follow-up questions on, that one's not going to be as easy for me to answer right now. So if you answered that question, feel free to email me and I can help you with that question.
Okay. So, next question. How can I get rid of the long-seeded weed in Bahia grass? Bahia.
So it depends on what type of, again, like with the first one, it depends on what type of yard you're in. So in order to know how to help you get rid of something, we're going to have to know some of the conditions that are going to be available for that. If you're in a pasture type yard, or if you're in a subdivision yard, I need to know basically what the predominant sod is there. So yeah, that's a question I'm gonna have to come back to with an answer on an email.
Okay, sounds good. So the next question is, can you please suggest some native ground covers for shade?
Yeah, so we talked about well, native ground covers. I don't know if we're gonna get into too much native, but we did talk about the sedums. That's more of a sunlight. For the shade, we talked about the English ivy. Mondo grass does really well. That produces a little purple spike. The variegated mondo grass, you can do that. The Vinca does really well, that we talked about in the video presentation. Be careful with the mondo grass, because it can get very, it can spread quite a bit, and it will reach out into your yard. So you have to make sure that you keep it confined and so forth.
Okay, the next question is, does the chlorine in our city water negatively affect our grass?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's something I want to touch on. If you have an issue with if you have an in-ground irrigation system and you think that you're having issues with your sprinkler or the type of water, Texas A&M also does water sampling. All right, so you can actually take a sample of your water, and if you'd like, you can email me and I can send you that information on how to send a water sample. But basically, you could get like the little water bottle, and empty, one of the little disposable water bottles that come in, like Dasani or whatever. All you need is like the 12-ounce bottle. You would empty it of the regular water that's in it. You would do a triple rinse of it to make sure that you got all the water out of it first, then fill it up with your current water that you're using to irrigate your lawns with, and then you would label it, and you're going to basically basically the same process as the soil sample. You're going to send it off to A&M, and there will be a cost involved, and they will be able to respond back to you if there is a high chlorination problem, if there's other issues with the water, and that's something probably just as important as the soil sample if you do use city water and so forth.
Okay, a couple more. Does fertilizer expire?
Yes, it will. I mean, and it depends on where you where you put fertilizer. So I wouldn't buy a lot at one time in bulk. Probably I would only recommend you buying what you need at that particular time. The longer it sits up, with the amount of humidity that we have here in the Houston area, if it's in a shed out back or whatever, and I'm sure where you're going to keep the rest of your garden implements, your tools, your lawnmower and stuff like that, the humidity in the air will tend to soak in that bag with that fertilizer, and it will actually turn it into like almost hard as concrete later on if it sits for an extended period of time. And the nutrients will drain out of it and so forth. So it's best to just get what you need at a particular time and use it, and don't have it sitting up. Yes.
Okay, Shannon, this question is, how do I control weeds?
So how do you control weeds? So basically what we talked about in our presentation today is if you have an established lawn already and you have weeds, all right, so you need to take a step back and look at your lawn, find out where the weeds are growing and why they're growing there. Is it an area that doesn't receive sunlight? Is it an area that is very thin on grass in the first place? Is there a soil issue that your sod is not growing in that particular area? Do you have a thatch problem? You might have been mowing for many years, and a lot of that dead grass has been built up, and it's kind of smothering your sod that you have down, and which is basically opening it up for other weeds to take over. So there's a variety of things there that you need to look at. But it's not an answer. It's not an answer I can give you yes or no, or this is what you need to do. I would encourage you, if you have a lawn and you want it to look good, take some time, walk in the lawn, try and deduct what's going on, be a detective. And, if you have questions and you need to send it to us, guys, take pictures of it, take clear pictures, take pictures that are going to be bright and not in the shade. That always helps when we're identifying solutions to what you're experiencing in your lawn. Let us know when the weeds come out. If you can give us an example of the weed, as much information that you can give us is all going to be great. But take a look at your lawn, walk out in your lawn, find out what's going on there, because those are going to be all questions we're going to have to ask you eventually to help you solve your problem.
Okay, Shannon, there are quite a few questions still left. Do you want to continue to answer them, or?
Probably we're going to need to go to email. If y'all can type in my email address again.
Sure. Let's see. All right, I am going to get your email address if you don't mind answering one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
It says, do I apply ryegrass only on the brown areas, or is it beneficial for all grass areas? Also, when is the best time to do this and how to do this?
You said ryegrass?
Ryegrass.
Yeah. So ryegrass is going to be a cool season grass. There's no use putting it out now because it will not grow. It will need to be seeded probably in later fall. You would look at overseeding that. You can actually overseed your whole lawn with ryegrass. Okay, so it's not going to hurt the grass or anything. It's just when it finishes next spring, it'll just die back down. All right, so you would put that in probably around, I would say, September, October-ish. You would overseed your whole yard with ryegrass. And if you don't have a seed spreader, I would invest in one of those, because that gives you uniform seed distribution over your yard, where you're not going to have patches of grass that you might have used by hand, like thrown out more in one particular area or another. There's some that you can strap over your shoulder with a little crank on it, and it'll distribute the seed evenly there. Or you can get the push kind, but that is a winter season, a cool season grass, and that would be the answer to that.
Okay, Shannon, so I just typed in your email address
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
chat box and your name, so they can send you the rest of the questions.
Okay. I do appreciate everybody's time. I hope that you learned some information. Again, part 2, we'll talk a little bit more about plant diseases and how, and insects and so forth, and some of those things that might be affecting your yard. So we'll be back with that in a month from today. And that presentation will be the same platform as this. So I think if you've never been part of our presentation before, Mr. Paul Winsky will be sending out, if I'm not mistaken, Brandy and Kim, a survey to take. And we would be very glad if you fill that out and send that back to us. And that helps us with future presentations and so forth. So again, thank you for joining us at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension today. My name is Shannon Dietz. I'm the County Ag Agent for Harris County. And we were so glad to have you here, and we wish you a good day.
Yes, and thank you. And next week is going to be Kim Perry talking about fall vegetable gardens. So tune in next week, but remember to register. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.